Well, hi guys, it's that time. It's our Bible teaching snippet of the day. Well, today I want to go back and I want to correct something else in this book that the lady, a statement that she made that is an error. If you recall, I've been using this back when I was teaching 2 weeks ago about the false medical system, and I probably should say it one more time. It didn't start out being a false medical system, but once Big Pharma got involved and they bought out the government, and now they regulate what gets approved through the FDA, and the FDA regulates what the insurance company approves, and then the insurance company decides what is paid out to doctors. Big Pharma has kidnapped the medical profession. There are awesome people that have been kidnapped and drawn into a mutated system that they never meant to get into, okay? There are good people in the medical field, doctors and nurses, and they are having to work within a system of pharmaceutical drugs that they don't want to issue to people, but they don't have a choice, okay? Now, I'm going to tell you this today, too, and if people get mad at me, you just go right ahead. I have good friends that are nurses and doctors that'll tell me, well, you know, we have patients that come in all the time, and they tell us what's wrong with them, and for us to write them a specific prescription for that problem. They watch TV, and they see commercials, and so when they see 2 people swinging in a swing happy, and they feel one of them symptoms, they go in and ask the doctor to give them the prescription so they can swing happily ever after in their swing set. And they never hear the side effects, that it's going to make you even sicker. You may have stomach ulcers, you may have bleeding bowels, you may be short of breath, but you know what? That's okay, man. You know, your sinuses will be clear, right? I mean, you just might die, but your sinuses will work great. But I have heard many doctors, because I do have friends and nurses, and they will just sit and say, you know, American citizens have been brainwashed through TV commercials to come in and tell us what is wrong with them and for us to give them a prescription. So I just want to say that. I have never told anyone not to go to a doctor. There are times we need to go to doctors, okay? I do strongly suggest people take responsibility for their own health and their own health choices. You need to take responsibility for your health. That's biblical. You should, years ago, doctors would tell people, you need to quit eating this, you need to cut back and not eat so much, you need to start eating this food, you need to start exercising. See, doctors used to try to get people healthy. And now, after the medical profession has been kidnapped by Big Pharma, and your average person has been indoctrinated through TV commercials to self-diagnose and demand prescriptions, all of that's gone now, okay? The whole thing has changed. What this Bible teacher will tell you, that you need to take responsibility to try to stay healthy, be proactive in your health so you're not reactive to sickness and disease and have to go and get on a bunch of prescriptions that over time will only make you sicker. Your doctors, if they're good doctors, will tell you that. They're not trying to mislead people. Okay, I'm moving on now. In this book, she said last week, I used it on 1 Timothy 5:22, where she made this false claim that Paul was warning every believer not to lay hands on sick people because they may get something from the sick person, whether it be sickness or an unclean spirit. And that is error, that is verse snatching. Paul was telling Timothy in Scripture, in context, how he needed to deal with leaders who through 2 or 3 witnesses proved that that leader, now I'm going to say it one more time because we don't understand what was going on in Scripture back then. All of these small little house churches, they're home-based meetings where groups of people are meeting every day all over this huge city of Ephesus. And Paul was writing to Timothy. He said, my dear son Timothy. Timothy was the overseer of all of the home churches, and he had other leaders helping oversee the growth of all of these Christians that were meeting in homes. And Timothy was supposed to, if he knew through the witness of 2 or 3 witnesses that a leader was sinning, he had to pull them out of leadership. And Paul's warning him to be careful about putting people in leadership too quickly and putting them back into leadership after they had been pulled out because of some sinful failure. Okay, that's all Paul was talking about in that scripture. When we say that Paul told us not to lay hands on the sick, now we are pitting Paul against what Jesus said. We can't do that. Jesus gets priority. But besides that, Paul is not going against what Jesus taught, guys. Paul is giving Timothy leadership advice. He is not saying, oh, by the way, don't listen to Jesus and what he said, listen to me. Paul never said that, guys, okay? We got to think about what we're believing, okay? So today I want to talk about one more error in this book. And this is not the first time I've heard this, but I am going to read this. She says, although the former physician traveled with Jesus constantly, never did Jesus ask for his opinion or any of his former answers. She is saying that Luke, the physician, traveled with Jesus and was one of Jesus' disciples. This is error. This is not true, and it is not. You cannot show that in Scripture. You do not see Luke's name mentioned in any of the 4 Gospels. Luke wrote the Gospel of Luke. Luke traveled with Paul, not Jesus. Okay. None of Jesus' 12 disciples were doctors. Jesus' disciples were fishermen, lay people, just common everyday, what the Pharisees and religious leaders called trash, unlearned men. Okay. Matthew was a tax collector. Judas was a soldier from a city called Iscariot. Judas Iscariot. Okay. And he was a soldier and well equipped to be the caretaker of the money bag. Think about this. Matthew was an accountant type because he was a tax collector. He was not the man in charge of the purse, the money bag, right? Judas was, because he was a trained soldier to protect from, they traveled all over, guys. And if one of them, if they got attacked and tried to be robbed, and people got robbed on the road all the time by a band of thieves, okay? So Judas Iscariot had the money bag because he was the tough guy of the bunch, okay? But anyway, let me get back on. I want to show you in Scripture today that where Luke comes on the scene. I want to show you this in the Bible, okay? I'm over in Acts chapter 16, verse 9, okay? And forgive me if I mispronounce the name of a city or something because, you know, I don't speak good Greek, okay? Anyway, it says, a vision appeared to Paul in the night. There was a man of Macedonia standing, begging Paul, saying, come over here to Macedonia and help us. And when he had seen the vision, immediately we sought out to go to Macedonia, concluding that the Lord had called us to preach the good news to them. Now remember, Luke penned out the book of Acts. So Luke said that Paul had a vision, and it says when Paul seen the vision, immediately we. This is when in the book of Acts, Luke flips it from they and them over to we and us, right here in Acts 16, verse 9. If you start in Acts chapter 1 and go all the way up to Acts chapter 16, verse 8, it's always talking in a third party type thing where it's them and they. It doesn't ever say, and we went here and we went that. Not until you get right here. Okay, I want to read you a couple of little footnotes real quick. In the footnotes here in the Passion, it says, apparently, talking about Acts chapter 16, verse 10, apparently Luke now joins the missionary team going to Macedonia. This is the first instance in the Acts of the Gospel going to Europe. Luke likely left the group later, as he is not included in the team starting in verse 40. Portions of Acts appear to be Luke's missionary travel journal. Okay, so yes, right here we see where Luke comes in and starts going with Paul. Okay, and at some point he separates himself and he's doing his own thing and in ministry. And by the way, he was not acting as a doctor anymore. He was acting as one of the apostles or a teacher, a traveling mission type guy. He was not going around being a doctor anymore. But what I want you to see, though, at some point, Luke comes back and he's traveling with Paul again, because we see in 2 Timothy, this is called Paul's last letter, and he talks about how everyone has forsaken him there in prison, and Luke is the only one who has left. He has left, and that Luke is the only one still with him, that everyone else has forsaken him. So we see Luke joining Paul here, and he travels with Paul, and then for a short time Paul stays in a city to help get a ministry going, and I believe it's actually right here in the book of Acts. But then later Luke will come back, okay? So, and I got one more footnote, and this is in the Disciples' Literal New Testament, and it says here, which I'm going to disagree with, but I want to read it to you. It says, some think that this verse was Luke, the man in the vision was Luke, crying out to Paul for Paul to come to Macedonia. And then it says this is the first time Luke includes himself in Paul's group when we get into Acts chapter 16:10. I agree with that part. We do see Luke joining Paul's group in Acts chapter 16, verse 10. But their footnote in the dream of Acts chapter 16, verse 8, that is not Paul standing there calling out. I'm sorry, that's not Luke calling out to Paul. And the reason I'm saying that is because it's very clear when you read that scripture. It says, come over into Macedonia and help us. And when Paul had seen the vision, immediately we sought to go out. So between verse 8 and 9, we see where Luke is already with Paul before they leave to go over to Macedonia. So Paul did not meet Luke in Macedonia. He met Luke in Troas. Okay, guys? Well, listen, and I do want to go, I'm just going to go just a little longer and give you a bonus out of this as well. Over here where it says, and Paul in a night vision, there stood a man of Macedonia. Did you know that Greek word for man is a non-gender word? It can actually mean a group of people, both men and women. And I wanted to bring that out because what this Bible teacher has studied, and this is just what, and it doesn't matter, guys. I just love to study. What I believe is the vision that Paul seen was the group of people right here that we see when he gets there. When he gets there, they go out on the Sabbath down at the riverside, and they meet a lady named Lydia. And she is having services out there worshiping God because she's a woman and she cannot open a synagogue and have a group of people meeting like a home church. So they were meeting out on the riverside, and Lydia was the leader of that group. But it took 10 Jewish men in a city for them to have a synagogue, okay? And I believe that Luke stayed to help establish that synagogue with her. So he left and went with Paul, and he helped set that synagogue up with Paul. So, and there was other men that they established so they could get that synagogue and going, and they didn't have to keep meeting on the riverside. But I just think that where this Greek word says that it could have been a group of men and women praying and calling out for Paul to come and help us. And as the minute he gets there, he goes straight to the riverside, and guess what he finds? A group of people, men and women both. Lydia is the leader of the group, and they're calling out, wanting Paul to help them establish churches in their area. Guys, I got to sign off. I love you, and I'll see you here tomorrow. Bye-bye.